You may have seen all kinds of videos made by fellow dungeon tubers on how to make cool dungeon maps, and then you get tempted. I get tempted all the time. I have so many subscriptions to those kinds of software, it's kind of crazy. But you don't need any of them. The original 80s DMs didn't use any of them. They used graph paper. You especially don't need them if you're playing in person. There is no use for those incredibly fancy maps if at some point they have to get rendered through your own lackluster map foo. Or your own good map foo, but you're not rendering them in 3D or with color or any of those things. So if you're going to draw the map by hand anyway on the table, you might as well have your reference document be drawn by hand as well. Welcome to Mystic Arts. My name is Daði. I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 10 years. In this bonus Tuesday episode, I'm going to show you how to make a dungeon on graph paper, because if you go to your local stationery retailer, you're going to find out that graph paper, pencil, eraser, and a pencil sharpener is cheaper than all those tools you have online to make dungeon maps, right? In other words, welcome to How to Dungeon. Let's start by getting a clean piece of graph paper. Yeet. Step 1, you go ahead and grab a pencil, just a regular old pencil, and you're going to draw with it real soft, and you're going to get the rough shape of your dungeon on the piece of paper. And when I say rough shape here, I mean a really, really rough shape. Don't actually do anything other than, blobby patches. In fact, when I do this, I think of it as the blobby patch. I think this is some kind of temple or dungeon. I think it's all underground. I'm going to put in a big sort of ritual chamber here very softly, and I'm going to tell myself this is the big ritual chamber. It's this kind of shape over here. I know that there's a room in front of it that I want to lead into it. But I also want there to be all kinds of access points all around, so I'm going to bake them into the idea right now. I like the idea of multiple entrances. I'm going to tell myself there's an entrance up here. I'm going to tell myself there's an entrance down here. I'm not really putting much thought into this right now. All I'm doing is sort of putting down blobs and seeing roughly how they inspire me. I like the idea of there being some kind of barracks maybe, and then there is some form of entry maze or tunnel that leads into these sections. Those sections here. We want to have multiple entrances, multiple ways of going everywhere. I think we need a library of some kind. We can stick that here. I like the idea of like a big crack or ravine. Right now, I think that's a pretty good blobby patch. We got a couple of entrances. We got some kind of tunnel connecting them, a crack or ravine, some series of rooms. We got this mini boss chamber right here. We've got this library. Right now, these are all just faint pencil sketches. I don't even know if that camera is going to be able to pick them up, but we'll see. Next up, what you want to do is a thin outline pencil sketch. Again, nothing major. You just want to thinly sort of etch it onto the piece of paper so you know roughly what you're doing. You're going to make these little shapes. It's good to count these out so I know this here's the corner. 1, 2, I want it to match. Got a rectangle here, rectangle here. I think I'm going to make an attachment for this library section. Right now, all I'm doing is I'm just sort of trying to make the grid match the blobs to try and get the rough outline. Do a little crack here. And I think in order for this crack to make any sense, we need to have holes in the walls. So I'm going to try and work that in. This here is one of our entry chambers. I always like having these sort of small entry chambers with loads of doors in them. I like the idea of entering a dungeon. You immediately know you're in a dungeon and you immediately don't know where you want to go next. I think that's more fun. So in that case, I'm actually going to make there be like a big cave thing. You just sort of scribble that on and be unafraid in this stage to just erase bits as they don't make sense to you. You just put an eraser and take them out. I think there's like a corridor here that's going to be thin, and then I think there's another room. How I'm making these decisions is entirely based on vibes and what I feel like drawing at the moment. The meaning is going to come later. You're going to add it as you go along. I don't like the idea of this long corridor. It's suddenly starting to bore me. I liked it when I draw it first, but now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, it doesn't seem that interesting. So actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some kind of big tower there. For tower, I'm going to center a point like this, and then I'm going to count out, 3 and 3. Let's do 4 and 4 and do another point. 4, 4. And I would draw a circle if I thought it would look good. I could get something like a little cat or a pillbox and use that to draw a circle. But I know that it's perfectly fine if it's got jagged angles. So a lot of the times, a lot of my towers have jagged angles just to save me a bit of work. So I put a line that goes through the dot about 4 squares. And then I connect the corners and I got this hexagonal tower thing. From there, I'm going to move this smudge on the paper. I'm going to draw a little connecting tunnel here into this section. And I think I want a little room here. Maybe these are our barracks. I'm adding a little room. Say little, it's probably going to be fairly big, actually. The point of dungeons like this is that they're fun to explore. So you want to be able to go any direction, move any which way. If you make them too linear, then why are they a dungeon at all? Why aren't they just a piece of paper that you go top to bottom railroading your players through, right? You can do that, you can have rails and an adventure that goes from adventure location to adventure location, but if you're putting down a dungeon map, I think it behooves you to make sure that the dungeon is something you can explore and have fun exploring. And you do that by having loads of connections all over the place. I'm going to continue adding these sections. I don't know how visible this is on the camera, but we've got an entry room. We're going to put an entry room here as well. And I'm trying to center these things. So they got two 5-foot squares on either side. I've got an entry room here. I've got this corridor into this room. I don't know what they are. Right now, there are a bunch of rooms connected by corridors. Dungeons aren't necessarily like that, but this one right now is. That's fine. I like the idea of this sort of cracked up bit in the middle actually being visible from various angles. I think in order for here to be a mini boss fight, if it's visible from various angles, that means the boss fight would get aggroed, sort of whatever. So I'm going to put quarters for the mini boss into this, and those quarters are going to be accessible through this tunnel, but also if somebody enters this room, the mini boss can follow after, right? So we're going to just put a little room here. This is a connecting corridor, and we're going to stick a room on it this way that I think I'm going to have be broken open. Right now we've got a somewhat rectangular dungeon that I think makes sense from various angles. I'm going to put in like a treasure room back here. And in order for a dungeon to be fun, I believe, you kind of have to be able to go through it a million different ways. So we're going to try and make sure that whatever we do, we're constantly adding different points of egress. Right now I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a slightly harder pencil sketch on all this. Just gonna mark them all down, see if the shape makes sense to me. I'm gonna put in all the doors right now. I think this tower is another entry point. Notice that when we're doing this, I didn't come in with a plan. I don't know what I was doing. I haven't figured it out yet. Right now, I'm just having fun. And when you get to that point where you're just having fun, you really start getting into a certain zone where you accept your ignorance and you just play. And this is kind of like a game, right? It's almost just this sort of fun play. And if you get to that point, I think you're doing it right. I'm also going to do a bit of filling in so that I know which sections definitely aren't rooms. This is a classic sort of underground complex style dungeon. Now, if pencil sketches are matching up, that's all fine and good. You don't need to worry too much about that. We're not here to worry. We are here to have fun. This is starting to make a lot of sense to me. Let's put in a big set of double doors. I like double doors indicating that's where the boss is. I want my players to know they're about to enter the boss room. I filled this in, but I didn't mean to. I'll put a secret door here because I think the main way to enter this room is through the boss fight. You get a little treasure room, but it's okay if there's a secret door and the players find it that way. All right, here we have a complex of some kind. There is a big ritual chamber or a vault or altar or something where the boss is. There's some kind of foyer to it, which is a good place for a mini boss, but the mini boss isn't in here. It's actually in one of these side quarters. There's a corridor. I think these are barracks. We got towers, entry points, a library, a treasure room, and something. I don't know. At this point, if we're getting to be happy with it, we can grab our uniball, whatever. This is just a ballpoint pen, and we're going to trace in the lines by hand as finely as we can. What's fun about this process is that it's sort of meditative too. You get to a point where you're just drawing these basic shapes, and if you're doing it right, then you're having fun. And if you're having fun, then you're doing it right. What's important with cave walls like this, these squiggly lines, is that we're gonna want to place them on a specific square. The trick is making it look irregular while still being obvious what square it's on. Because while it would be nice if this looked really pretty, its main job is utility. And in order to get to that utility, you need to make sure that it's obvious what each square is and whether or not a player can stand there. So we are going to squiggle them so that it's sort of obvious whether or not they are on a particular square. Here I'm going to go do a half square. I'm going to break my own rule that I just said because rules are not worth following for rules' sake. Going to draw in these lines, and we've got this pen. It's entirely possible for somebody to get anxious thinking, oh, if I make a mistake, it's permanent. But remember, this is also primarily utility for you. You don't have to do it in pen stroke. This is just if you want to. If you want to get that sort of classic feeling of making dungeon maps by hand, which I think is a lot of fun, adding a little bit here, something that wasn't in the original pencil sketch. Remember that following your pencil sketch just for the sake of following the pencil sketch is also just pointless. Like, you might as well continue creating every step of the way. You don't need to stop making just because you told yourself you were gonna, right? What I think is one of the most beautiful things about Dungeons and Dragons is the fact that you're sort of not in a hobby. You're in like a nexus of hobbies. You're kind of in all the hobbies. It's art, it's music, it's writing, it's direction, it's acting, it's improv, it's comedy, it's doing pencil sketches. It's drawing them in with pen, painting minis, talking to people. You're not limited to just one thing. You can do all of those things. You can have fun however you like. You know, designing dungeons like this is basically just applied logic and design. You're thinking spatially, layering problem solving, building in a challenge, and a lot of this is similar to what you find in good math or design training. Which is why this video is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is all about helping you get smarter every day through interactive lessons in math, logic, computer science. And what makes it stand out is how interactive it is. It's not just watching lectures, but it's solving puzzles, step by step. If you're the kind of DM who enjoys building puzzles, going through their courses is actually interactive and fun, and it might be right up your alley. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/mysticarts or click the QR code on screen. There's also a link in the description for 20% off on their annual subscription. Alright, let's get back to the dungeon. Now I'm going to fill in the black areas, the areas where you can't access because they're not rooms, so that when I look at this, it's more obvious which parts are rooms and which parts aren't. You can get really fancy with these. But your job is just to know at a glance whether or not you can enter a certain area. If you've ever seen Dyson Logos map, they have these beautiful cross-hatching, which I am not as good at doing as they are. But that's okay, because if I don't try, I'm never going to be as good. So I'm going to keep trying. I'm just going to embrace the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. If my players were watching, they would say, Daði's maps don't normally look this good. He doesn't put this much effort in. And they'd be entirely correct. You don't need to put this much effort in. I'm just showing you how you can do it if you want to. This way, it should be obvious when you look at the map which bits are rooms, right? That is the entire reason we're doing this. Now, if you remember our video on Map Foo, or you read the article that Chris Perkins wrote, you'd know that his philosophy is that you don't need to put 50 things into a room. You just need to put 1 or 2 icons, and then you know what the room is about. So for instance, this room where the mini-boss sleeps, I'm just going to put a bed in. I'll do a little drawing of a bed. I'll do some cupboards, and that's probably enough, right? I think I'm going to decide that this here is like a feast hall or something. So I'm going to do some tables and some chairs. I'm going to try and make sure that I keep all these elements in their respective squares, because I know that furniture is difficult terrain. So I'm now marking these 4 squares as difficult terrain, right? Here, there is a stairway that goes in, so we're going to do that. I think there is a spiral staircase somewhere in here, but I also think there's a pile of rubble, so I'm going to do rubble. I'm going to fill one of these corners up with rubble. Notice that inside the area I'm designating as rubble, I can sort of have the rocks be odd shapes and stuff, but I'm actually going to try my best to make it be obvious to anyone looking at the map which squares are rubble. If you remember the Map Foo video, you remember that rubble comes in 2 shapes. They're in blocks and stippling dots, just like Chris Perkins taught us. Here's the mini-boss chamber. I think I'm also going to put some columns in. Block this door. That seems goofy. You know, if I'd done this in pencil, which I probably should have done, then I wouldn't have done that. But here we are. That's fine. And there we go. I don't think you need a lot more. You've got sort of a version of a dungeon here. There are still some pencil strokes all over the place. You can just get an eraser, and you can erase those back out, right? Get the blobby shapes gone, because you won't erase the ink. By the way, here's the important bit. Here's the bit I want you to take away from this video. I have never done this before. This is my first time drawing, pencil, pen, all those things. I've done graph paper drawing before. I've done dungeons before, but I've never done exactly this method with a pen and an eraser and then the blobs and then the thin outline. I've done parts of this setup, but I've never done the whole process for a whole dungeon, because you don't need to. You can just do whatever you need to be ready. I tend to think of running D&D and being a dungeon master kind of like being in broadcast television. You're preparing, the reason we call it prep is you're preparing to go live. You're preparing to be live on TV, being performative, right? Putting on a show. And what you do is you prepare all the stuff you can prepare, and the stuff you can't prepare, you have to get ready to live without, right? So you get to a point where you prioritize everything you have to prioritize to get started, right? All the things that are difficult to make up in the moment, you get them ready first. But then here's the kicker. At some point, you're going to run out of time. And when you run out of time, there's going to be stuff that you're going to have to go figure out how to do live as improv. I encourage you to prioritize your list of prep, right? Start by prepping all the stuff that you can't just wing or make up. Then, if there's stuff like drawing a dungeon map, put that next. Occupying the rooms, put that next. And you go down the list. You start at the top and you try and prep as much as you can going down the list before it's showtime. But once it's showtime, if all you have is this dungeon map, which by the way I think looks pretty good considering I've never done this before, then you're fine. You just go. You know what I mean? What's in here? I don't know, but there's a temple, so there's a cult, maybe? Goblins, hobgoblins, jackal wares. What are their jackal wares? There's a bunch of jackal wares in here, and there's some kind of jackal ware god. Maybe there's a lamia, right? I didn't write that in a script. I'm just sitting here looking at a map, saying things, because I'm pretending like there's a session in 20 minutes. And I'll go look up the lamia stat block, I'll go look up the jackal ware stat block, I'll occupy these rooms somehow, I'll make sure that there's treasure, there's someone to talk to, maybe there's a prisoner, or a lamia, or a jackal ware that wants to defect. I'll make sure there are different elements you can pull in, and then, suddenly, you've got an adventure ready, and you are okay for showtime. What's especially fun about drawing on graph paper is that it feels kind of like you're reaching back into history. I mean, this is how they used to do it. Those 80s DMs I was talking about at the start, they just did it on graph paper. The only reason Undermountain is the exact size that it is, and by the way, completely square if you go look at those maps, is because Ed Greenwood went out and bought huge graph paper, the biggest he could get, filled up all the squares 23 times. And now there is 23 layers of Undermountain. That's just how it works. Go to your local stationery store, your local stationery retailer, whatever, and buy stuff like this, play around with it, and see if you aren't having fun. The thing I love about Dungeons and Dragons and playing RPGs in general is that I'm not at the computer. I spend so much of my time at the computer. I'm a video game developer. I stare at computer screens all day. And now I do this YouTube thing where I stare at computer screens all day. And every now and again, I have an opportunity to sit around a table with my friends in person and look them in the eye and have a conversation. Yeah, the conversation's about being an elf or killing a dragon or whatever. But I get to do this physical activity. And when something's wrong, when something's broken, I don't need tech support. I don't need IT. I just need to talk to my friend. If you're fighting against software and it's not doing what you want it to do, then it might be time to ditch it. I'm a big believer in software. I use all kinds of it. And I use it all the time, and I probably use it more than I use this. But every now and again, I just want to get in touch with how things used to be done and get in touch with a simplistic way of doing it, because I will not have tech issues with a graph paper. I don't have subscription issues with a graph paper. It doesn't crash or save or take loading time. I just draw and have fun. And this didn't take me that long. It's only been a few minutes. And if all this sounds impossible right now, I want to remind you that I really haven't done this before, and I think it looks pretty good considering I've never done dungeons. And if this seems impossible, I want you to know that you can just do a few repetitions and you'll get pretty good at it very fast. This isn't a complicated art form. There's literally graph paper and you just draw along the lines. It's actually dead simple. Anyone could do it. And if you start right now, you're going to get amazing at it really quick. So I encourage you, draw your next dungeon on a bit of graph paper and, just live like a Luddite for a bit, because eventually you're going to grab this graph paper, you're going to go in front of your friends and you're going to talk about elves, and that's going to be it. Ditch the screens for a bit. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend, and if you want to support us, come by our Patreon. We've got an exclusive Discord. We got behind the scenes access and video, and monthly homebrew PDFs with gun rules, warlord, hex crawling, all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you'll find things you'll really like. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.